Hello and welcome to my Today in History YouTube channel. My name is Sotonye Afiesimana. If you're a subscriber, thanks very much for your support. If you are a returning visitor, I appreciate you dropping by once again. Why not subscribe so that you receive updates of my video uploads? If you're here for the first time, welcome to my channel where I discuss events that occurred on this day in history with a view to informing, hopefully entertaining, and most importantly, learning lessons from the positive events and mistakes of the past, and hopefully not repeating these mistakes. Because as the saying goes, history tends to repeat itself. So guys, let's get cracking with today's important events as recorded in history. It's the 11th of November, and we'll start with the year 1417. Of course, we do have to roll back our blind to reveal what's behind the blind. So, Martin V, on this day in 1417, was unanimously elected Pope, bringing an end to the Great Schism. So, that's Martin V, elected Pope on this day in 1417. So for those of you who may not know what the word schism is, Google it up. Something to do with church division. Anyway. Yeah, so an end to the Great Schism was brought about with the election of Pope Martin V, pictured here, on this day in 1417, so 603 years ago. It's a long time ago. All right, so next is this picture here, Christopher Columbus's second voyage, which he made in 1493. This is the day that he sighted the island of Saint Martin. So it's going to be somewhere here in the Caribbean area, Caribbean Sea. Fortunately, I wasn't able to pick it up in this map, but yeah, his second voyage happened on this day in 1493, I beg your pardon. So the island of St. Martin was sighted in 1493 by Christopher Columbus. So I did eventually find the island of St. Martin, as you can see pictured here in orange, not far from Cuba, San Juan, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, St. Lucia, Barbados. Yeah, so that's St. Martin Island that was sighted by Christopher Columbus on this day in 1493. Let's move on now to the year 1821. This man's name is Fyodor Dostoyevsky. He was a Russian novelist, philosopher, short story writer, essayist, and journalist. Dostoevsky's literary works explore human psychology in the troubled political, social, and spiritual atmospheres of the 19th century Russia, and engage with a variety of philosophical and religious themes. His most acclaimed works include Crime and Punishment, which was published in 1866, The Idiot, 1869, Demons, 1872, and The Brothers Karamazov in 1880. Dostoevsky's body of works consists of 12 novels, 4 novellas, 16 short stories, and numerous other works. Many literary critics rate him as one of the greatest psychological novelists in world literature. His 1864 novel, Notes from Underground, is considered to be one of the first works of existentialist literature. So Fyodor Dostoevsky, who was born on this day in 1821. Russian novelist, philosopher, short story writer, essayist, and journalist. Okay, let's move on to the next noteworthy event of today, 1831. I have featured this guy before. This was the day that the African American slave pictured here, Nat Turner was hanged after leading a slave rebellion that resulted in the deaths of some 60 white people. In addition, many innocent slaves were massacred in the accompanying hysteria. So that is Nat Turner, who was hanged on this day after leading a slave rebellion. So so go check out my other videos. If I find the link, if I find the video, I'll put a link here so that you can go check out, find out more about Nat Turner. So yeah, well, it's I'm not a proponent or a supporter of violence, you know, but sometimes when people are pushed to the wall, they feel that they have no other option but violence to resist being treated less than human. You know, I'm going to leave it there. So we're not advocating violence. This was a pointer to in history as to how not to go about looking for change. You know, like I said, it's easier said than done. Sometimes when one is pushed to the wall, one has to fight back. You know, so that's Nat Turner, who was captured and hung on this day in 1831. Okay, so a few more pictures of him. Guess would survive. Let's see. Yeah, so that's a plaque commemorating Nat Turner's insurrection. So I'm going to read it. Those who are blind or have issues with their eyesight. So it says here, so it's a plaque that's been erected by a roadside. Looks like a country road. It says the title is the U122. Not sure what that means. So Nat Turner's insurrection. On the night of 21st to 22nd August 1831, Nat Turner, a slave preacher, began an insurrection some 7 miles west with a band that grew to about 70. They moved northeast toward the Southampton County seat, Jerusalem, now Cortland, killing about 60 whites. After 2 days, militiamen and armed civilians quelled the revolt. Turner was captured on 30th October, tried and convicted, and hanged on the 11th of November. Some 30 blacks were hanged or expelled from Virginia. In response to the revolt, the General Assembly passed harsher slave laws and censored abolitionists. So the immediate aftermath obviously wasn't good. He and his people killed 60 white people unlawfully. So I guess he was captured and eventually tried and hung for the insurrection. So again, I don't advocate violence because usually violence begets violence and the end is not usually good. But these were the beginnings of the freedoms that African Americans enjoy today from slavery. But unfortunately, in situations like these, a lot of lives are lost. You know, sadly, lives get lost. So hopefully, we're learning from history, which is one of the reasons why I started this channel. You know, we look back in history and see that history tends to repeat itself, and hopefully, we learn from history so that when we see a semblance of things that have happened before in the past, we know how to tackle those things. We may think that we're more developed now, we're living in a more civilized society than some of these people who lived hundreds of years ago. But you know, you look at our society critically and you think we're not much different from these guys who lived centuries ago. We're not much different from them. The same things are happening today. Yeah, maybe on the, you couldn't even argue that it's on a smaller scale. It isn't on a smaller scale, you know. Percentage-wise, I guess, you know, in relation to the population of the world today, you could argue, you know, most of us are more civilized in quotes, but the point is that human beings still have that instinct for violence, that base instinct for violence. So we hope that we dig into our past so that we do not repeat the mistakes of the past in the present and future. Right, let's move on now to the year 1865, so 34 years later. On this day, this lady here, her name is Mary Edwards. She was a physician during the American Civil War. She was awarded the U.S. Medal of Honor for her work as a surgeon during the American Civil War, the first woman to be granted the U.S. Medal of Honor. However, the award was rescinded in 1917, not quite sure why, but reinstated 60 years later in 1977. I'm assuming that was posthumously reinstated. So she must have died by the time the award was reinstated 60 years later. So 1889, this was the day that Washington was admitted to the Union as the 42nd state of the United States. So this is a map of the 48 contiguous states and the other two states, Alaska and Hawaii, the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. So Washington State admitted to the Union on this day in 1889. 1918, on this day, the guns fell silent. The Great War ends, later known as World War I. At 5 a.m. on this day, 1918, the Allied powers and Germany signed an armistice document in the railway carriage of Ferdinand Foch, the commander of the Allied armies. And 6 hours later, World War I came to an end. Okay, so there are pictures aplenty, jubilant faces, the American flag, the British flag, the Union Jack. Germany gives up, it says here, newspaper cutout. I think this is the front page actually of the New York Journal. It says Germany gives up, war ends at 2 p.m. Great War ends. Soldiers jubilating with a beer. Another newspaper article, war ends. Germans sign armistice and fighting stopped at 6 a.m. Jubilant crowds, few American flags flying. It's over. The Daily Mail. Joy and Thanksgiving mark start of the armistice on greatest day in our history. More crowds, the Union Jack again, this must be the United Kingdom. Hordes and hordes and hordes, thousands, probably tens of thousands of people. And then the American flag again. People holding up to American flags, a crowd. Much smaller crowd than the British crowd. Okay, so this is the day that World War I ended officially, 102 years ago on this day. Then, in a related matter, exactly 100 years ago, today, Armistice Day was commemorated, celebrated for the first time. So Armistice Day, the anniversary of the end of World War I, was marked with the burial of unknown soldiers in tombs in Paris and London, and a similar ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, in the United States of America. That happened in the year 1921 on this day. Okay, let's move on to the year 1966. On this day, in 1966, the Gemini 12, or Gemini 12, the last spacecraft in the Gemini series, and the first to make an automatically controlled re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, was launched. So this picture shows the 1966 launch of Gemini 12, the last spacecraft in the Gemini series. Also the first to make an automatically controlled re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. 1974, 8 years later, American actor Leonardo DiCaprio was born. He is noted for his portrayals of unconventional and complex characters. Very good actor. So happy birthday, Leonardo DiCaprio is 46 years old today. In 1975, on this day, Angola declared her independence after the Portuguese withdrew. So Angola is a former Portuguese colony. On this day, they gained their independence from Portugal. The year again, 1975. So 45 years ago today. 1992, history was made when the Church of England voted to ordain women as priests. The first ordination took place 2 years later in 1994. So this was the day that the Church of England voted to ordain women priests. So this picture was taken 2 years later in 1994. So pictures of women priests, first time in history in the United Kingdom, probably first time in history anywhere in the world. So there we go. Controversial for many people, but it happened anyway. And that's a priest leading a choir of women priests singing their hearts out. Congregation in a big church, Church of England as well. The female priest giving the bread, communion, I think it's called, yeah, communion. So bread and wine. First communion for them. Newly ordained. Okay, Archbishop of Canterbury, I think. Pictured here in the middle with two priests on either side of him. Okay, last but not least, on this day, the world lost Yasser Arafat, who was president from 1996 to 2004 of the Palestinian Authority, chairman 1969 to 2004 of the Palestine Liberation Organization (PLO), and leader of Fatah, the largest of the constituent PLO groups. So this is the young Yasser Arafat who died on this day in 2004. On that note, folks, we have come to the end of Today in History for the 11th of November. Thanks for dropping by, guys. I appreciate your support. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. My name again is Sotonye Afiasimama. Do stay safe, and I shall see you tomorrow, 12th November, for another edition of Today in History. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.